Hi, everyone. I'm James Protin. I'd like to give a special thank you to our sponsors for the podcast, Candelore's Barking Beauties, with 5 locations throughout the region, and His Place Coffee Community and more here in Menneson for hosting us.
Hi, my name is Kelsey Candelore, owner of Candelore's Barking Beauties, where our salon is your salon. We have 5 convenient locations, no appointment needed. All breeds welcome. Any size dog. We are open Tuesday through Saturday from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. We have 5 convenient locations: Elizabeth, White Oak, Finleyville, Monongahela, and Irwin. Love to have you visit us.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Nick and I hit the road this morning. We're in Harrisburg for episode number 13. Our guest today is Gene Barr. He's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the state's largest broad-based business advocacy organization. Gene has more than 40 years of experience in various facets of government, political and public affairs activity, and business operations. And in 2021, he was ranked number 10, which is impressive, by the way. I wasn't mentioned on that list, but that's okay. On the city and state Pennsylvania's Power 100 list of the key players in the Pennsylvania political process. He's also a board member and former chair of the National Civil War Museum and the author of a nonfiction book on the American Civil War titled A Civil War Captain and His Lady, A True Story of Love, Courtship, and Combat. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for having us here.
Well, Jim, thanks for coming out to Harrisburg. Yeah,
it's a nice trip. We like making this trip every once in a while. It's a good trip, and right out the turnpike, and we not only can get to meet with you, we can go across the street.
Wind up here in the Capitol. Good for you.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, listen, and as I said, I don't expect you to remember, but we had met. We have. The thing that we share both in our backgrounds is the Chamber of Commerce.
Yes.
And
exactly.
I was president of a small regional Chamber of Commerce out in southwestern PA, the Mon Valley Regional. And we were at a function here in Harrisburg, and we met.
All right.
But really like to talk a little bit about doing business in Pennsylvania. Okay. I'm a big fan of the Commonwealth, and having had a small business and doing business development in the engineering industry and in construction industry, there are a lot of hurdles here. There are a lot of hurdles we have to overcome.
Well, there are, and I'm a big supporter of PA too. I couldn't have this job and not be that. So I was someone who was born in the state, born in the Philadelphia area, left the state for 7 years, came back because we did want to be here. Mm-hmm. Myself, my wife, and the 2 kids at the time. And what's the challenging thing about Pennsylvania is we should be doing better than we are. And I think we've had some recent wake-up calls. Once again, for the 10th consecutive decade, 100 years, we've lost at least 1 congressional seat. And what will happen is the media will look at that and say, oh, geez, who's going to lose the seat? And is it Connor Lamb's seat, et cetera? Well, we should be focusing on why does that keep happening?
Why exactly? What's the cost?
And you keep seeing states like North Carolina, Texas, Florida, et cetera, adding seats. Mm-hmm. This year also California lost one because there's some things going on there that are pushing their population out. But the focus should be, why does this keep happening? Despite the fact of being a state that has incredible assets, as you know.
Absolutely.
We've got some of the best educational institutions in the world. World-class health facilities, proximity to markets, pretty decent infrastructure. Our location in terms of those proximity to markets. Our energy resources, number 2 natural gas producer in the United States, a good workforce. Why do we keep losing ground here? And the problem is, it's a couple things. One, it's our business tax structure. We have the number 2, second highest corporate net income tax rate in the United States. Thank God for New Jersey, who makes us look good by comparison. All right, so you have that going on. And 2, and for you guys out in the Pittsburgh area, you know this, our permitting and our regulatory climate drives business elsewhere because the perception is, and the reality is as well, as it was in the papers, that the problems U.S. Steel had in building a new facility with a permit. Right. And so in the first 2 months of this year, Pennsylvania lost more than $22 billion of investment that we really weren't even looked at for. $20 billion for a new Intel chip facility that was announced it was going to be built in Columbus, Ohio. They never looked at us, and I confirmed that with the administration official. They didn't even talk to us because of the CNI.
Right.
2 steel facilities, each worth more than $1 billion, that opted to go elsewhere. One to Arkansas and one to West Virginia. We have got to change that, and we're now in the process of our budget. And I feel more optimistic now about the ability to make that tax structure more competitive than I've had in decades.
That's excellent. So
It's really good.
Where does that confidence come? Where does that come from?
Well, the confidence comes from the fact that all 4 legislative caucuses and the governor have said, finally, yes, we want to reduce. And we don't want to, it's not going to be this, well, we're going to do this, but we're going to make it up here and make, kind of like a 1 step forward, 1 step back. We've finally come to terms saying, let's take the step forward and not worry about going back, because we cannot continue to have our parents and grandparents get on planes and go to Raleigh and Tampa and Orlando and Austin to go see their kids and grandkids. Shouldn't happen. And as we continue to talk about how much we spend on education, it becomes disheartening to think that the money we're spending on education in far too many cases goes to educate what becomes another state's workforce.
Absolutely, it's huge. And as parents, and you have children, I have children and now grandchildren in college. That's a big deal, right? Because I have our youngest is in the Air Force, so I get that. He's right now in North Dakota. This is his 3rd posting, so you got to go out there to see them. But we have 10 other grandchildren that we want to keep in Pennsylvania.
Exactly.
Right? So my oldest, who is now a freshman in college, and I'm wondering, what is she going to do? What's going to be there for her when she comes out? Is she going to have to leave the state?
That's what drives us every day.
Absolutely.
To be honest, when I get up, I'm a firm supporter of our free market system. You can call it capitalism, but it's really a system of economic choice, of having your family and my family make the best decisions on a daily basis for what's best for their families, and not have all of those micro decisions made at some kind of bureaucratic level. I firmly believe that's the best one. And in order to do that, we've got to make sure that we in Pennsylvania are competitive with other states, because other states, quite frankly, have done a much better job of creating the impression and making the reality that they're more competitive, because, as you know, investment follows the path of least resistance.
That's exactly right.
And we have put up tremendous amounts of resistance to investment in this Commonwealth over the years.
And Ohio has been using that against us for years.
Ohio's been
they're the best at it. Yeah, they're actually the best at it.
And a lot of it goes back to, for better than 30 years. And back in 1991, and to me this is the greatest example, I use this all the time. In 1991, I was still working for BP at what was then their U.S. headquarters in Cleveland. I was in the retail marketing side. And I remember that the lobbyist for Pennsylvania came back. We're in a meeting with senior VP of marketing. And the lobbyist came in and said, well, Pennsylvania's taking their CNI to 12.25%. And they're taking this tax here and this tax here. They had a $1 billion budget shortfall. And they had to pass tax increases of $3 billion to give away money to incent people to vote for this tax. It was all on business.
Right.
And I remember that the vice president sat there and said, that's the end of our direct investment in Pennsylvania. Wow. And it took a few years, but they did. They sold the refinery, Truck Stops of America. They sold, anytime you see a BP sign, that's not owned by BP. They have, as far as I know, the only thing they have now is a little piece of a solar farm in Northeast PA. ProCare facilities.
That's powerful.
They divested themselves.
Yes.
They said, we're out. And you didn't see a big announcement, but you just simply saw them quietly withdrawing, selling pipelines, selling terminals, doing all this because Pennsylvania was no longer attractive to them.
It's sad. And when you think about, talk about the gas industry, and we are, with the Marcellus Shale, the number 2 natural gas producer, right? And I don't feel, and I'm interested to see how you feel about this, but I don't feel that we have even come close to utilizing that resource in our best interest. It seems like, we take a step forward and 3 back, and we just keep tripping over our own feet.
Well, we haven't, Jim, and you're exactly right. So what happened when we discovered what we had? And honestly, it has been even more prolific than many people thought that it would. Even some of the experts thought it would. Right. These wells that are producing in Northeast PA and Southwest PA, of course, as you know, in the western part of the state, you have wet gas, you have you have the liquids that you can ship. But think about what happened when it was realized what we had here. wow, this is great. I wonder what new tax we can put on.
Exactly.
And as an organization, we had to fight against, they're being taxed at the corporate level, they're being taxed with all their payroll taxes, they're paying property taxes, and now it's like, what new tax can we put on?
Right.
Rather than saying, how can we embrace this industry, make sure that they're operating in an environmentally responsible manner, make sure they're following all the laws.
And we do that.
And we do that.
And we do that.
And they do it to the highest standard.
It's the highest, most regulated industry in the Commonwealth.
Absolutely. And we've had people, bluntly, who don't want any fossil fuel. And
Right.
so, as I've said to people, certain people look at this almost like a military operation. So when you look at it, if you can't ban fossil fuels overall, and they lost the decision to ban fracking, what
Right.
do? So you begin to back up to the next hill, the next fight, which is let's block the pipelines, which frankly, New
Right.
York and New Jersey have done a phenomenal job.
They've done a great job. You're absolutely
We
right.
should be a player. We, Pennsylvania, in addition to the U.S., should be a tremendous player on the geopolitical side. We've been saying for
Absolutely.
6 years
Absolutely.
that Vladimir Putin has been setting up Western Europe. And we also have pretty strong evidence he's been involved in disinformation against the U.S. and the Pennsylvania energy side. He recognized what hydraulic fracturing would do to Russia because of the tremendous strength it would unleash. So we know what he's been doing. And unfortunately, you have people like the governors of New York and New Jersey who have unwittingly played into his hands, such that empowered him, gave him the leverage to invade Ukraine because he said, I got him over a barrel, no pun intended.
But you're exactly right.
They need my oil and natural gas.
Right.
And now it's getting tough for some of them. You cut it off to Finland, et cetera. And so we should be a much bigger player, and if we could unleash these resources. And keep in mind, natural gas has been responsible for the CO2 reductions that we've seen here.
Yes, absolutely.
And natural
Absolutely.
gas makes wind and solar possible.
Right. Yeah, there's literally no path forward that doesn't include natural gas in some
Absolutely.
fashion.
Even environmental groups that are pragmatic about this say, yeah, natural gas is going to be part of this moving forward.
It has to be
They
part of the
acknowledge
equation.
it. It has to be. You're
It has
exactly
to be
right.
part of the equation, and it is it's the leader. In my mind, it's the leading resource in Pennsylvania's business community moving
Yes.
forward, right? So whatever we become in Pennsylvania from a business standpoint, natural gas has to lead the way.
It does. It does.
You know,
because it powers our homes, it powers our businesses, it creates
Right.
the products that all of us need, and creates the movement in this economy.
And it's safe and clean.
And it is.
And I think one of the things that always struck me, and when I got into the gas industry, when several years ago, I get kind of anointed as a practice leader because I had a large network. I knew a lot of people, and I was sitting in Pittsburgh, right in the I was right there, Washington County, in the middle of the Marcellus Shale play. So the company I was with at the time was the largest engineering company in the world, right? And they added. I was literally, Gene. I was literally in a meeting for their oil and gas practice, right? Global. There were guys from in Alaska and Australia and China, everywhere. So they put this organization chart up, and I'm doing water and wastewater stuff, right? I had just won a project in Chambersburg. I'm in Chambersburg, and I look up on this screen, and my name's in a box.
Okay.
I'm leading the Marcellus Shale, right?
Okay.
And I said, I don't know what that is.
Right.
The only thing I knew about the Marcellus Shale at the time was what I read in the papers.
Correct.
Right. So at the time, Range Resources, that they were right there in the backyard. I just went and literally knocked on the door and said, hey, tell me what I need to know. And I think where I'm going with that is when the environmentalists and the general public got a hold of that F word, right? Fracking. That was, bam, they started banging at.
Absolutely.
And they started doing it before the industry was able to get it out there.
Exactly right.
And we've been in defensive mode ever since. We being the industry, right? And I'm not an apologist, or I'm speaking for them by any stretch, but I think that's really where we got behind the eight ball, is that they got out there behind that word first.
Well, they did. And, as I said, you can track some of the funding that has come from foreign sources to undermine the industry. And it took a while because at the outset, I think a lot of people thought Marcellus Shale's an NHL goalie. I mean, it took a while to convince
That's exactly
them
right.
of what this gas is
Right.
and what it could do. And particularly in the western part of the state, you guys have seen it.
Oh, yeah.
I've been on numerous sites, I'm sure you have as well, and you see how it's responsibly done, more responsibly than
Yes.
virtually any other country in the world does it. And you've also seen the results of it with the investment that Shell has made in the western part of the state.
Absolutely.
Significant investment. And it's one of the reasons why, as you look politically at this, you have seen a split in the union ranks, where the building trades are supporting the industry, whereas some of the government unions are siding with the ardent environmentalists who want to say none of this.
Sure, and like everything, and Gene, you know this. You've been in discussions and negotiations across the street. There's always a compromise position.
Of course there
it's
is.
always there, but somebody has to be willing to stand up and put it out there,
Absolutely.
right? And if you won't go there, I mean, you can stay at both ends forever.
Absolutely.
Right? And there is a compromise and a middle ground when it comes to natural gas in PA and business in PA, right?
Absolutely.
But it's, the environmentalists are right, the industry's right, and here we are as residents of the Commonwealth,
Right.
right in the middle.
Right, and we've made strides. I mean, we created this impact tax, and all of that, which has delivered billions into every single county in Pennsylvania.
Absolutely.
Got money out of that tax.
Absolutely.
But then, well, that's not enough.
Yeah,
That's not enough.
Counties that don't even have gas,
Exactly.
we're
Right.
still benefiting from it.
Exactly right. For the parks, for all kinds of assets,
Absolutely.
hospitals, et cetera,
Yeah.
has gone to so many different places. But unfortunately for many others, not right. Because if you take the tack that I don't want it at all, then you're going to do whatever you can to destroy it, which is unfortunate.
It is. It's very unfortunate because it's something that, other than Texas and Louisiana, the Gulf and the Dakotas, every other state in the country should want this, because this is it's a differentiator for us. It separates.
Absolutely.
And again, Pennsylvania has become, and for a while, but Pennsylvania is definitely one of the most important states in this country. Right?
No
It's a
question.
beautiful state where we have so much going for us.
Right.
And politically, we're a very important state. I mean, we elect presidents here, right? We elect presidents here.
Very
Bottom line.
clearly a key swing state, no question about it.
Absolutely.
We're probably the prototypical purple state, if you think about it.
Yeah,
You
you're
have a
exactly
Democrat
right.
governor, split on the Senate side right now, pending the outcome of November's elections.
Right.
Republican House,
Yep.
Republican House and Senate, Democrat Attorney General, and Republican Auditor General and Treasurer. It's almost the definition of a purple state.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. And what you had mentioned a little while ago, getting that kind of pyramid, all four caucuses and the governor on the same page,
Yes.
moving in the same direction. That's rare.
It's very rare.
That's rare, and that's
Took
tremendous.
a long time.
Guaranteed.
Let's make sure. Let me go find wood here. Let's make sure we can get that moving. For the
Yeah,
next
absolutely,
Month.
because there's a lot of sweat equity involved in
Absolutely,
that. I'm sure.
yeah.
I'm sure so. Well, what are your thoughts on where do we go from here? How do we move forward? You're going to be stepping down here, retiring, and
Right.
much deserved. Okay, and by all accounts, this particular organization is going to be in good hands moving forward, largely because of the ground, what you've done here, and what you've built. But how do you see us moving forward as a Commonwealth? It's still very difficult to bring new business in here, even a small scale, right? That product that I had mentioned to you, the company EcoFlex is the company, right? They're a Canadian, they're a Canadian corporation,
Right.
So the CEO contacted our mutual friend Mike and basically said, "Listen, the Canadian government's hit me with a $25,000 a month tax because I use petroleum-based products for my product." He said, "I want to move my corporate headquarters to the U.S. I want you to get me in Pennsylvania."
Okay.
Right? It's been a struggle. Now, you're talking about maybe a couple hundred jobs. We're not talking about thousands of jobs, right? But this is a great product. And it could wind up being upwards of 500, right? Because
Absolutely.
if we make this a corporate headquarters and a manufacturing distribution hub, as you said, because of geographically where we're at,
That's right.
right? We can distribute literally to the majority of the United States, right? So, but why do you see a path? And I guess, do you believe that the politicians, that the legislature and the governor have to create that path, or is that path created by the business community itself?
It's a great question. So first off, I believe this organization will be in good hands. My successor, Luke Bernstein, is great. I think Luke will do phenomenally well. There's two critical things we need to do, and this budget is going to be a key start to that. One of them is to take the actual steps that will serve to strike and make us more competitive. But the second thing is addressing the perception of what Pennsylvania is. And a lot of where we are, where we fall down, unfortunately, is perception. We're perceived to be, in many cases, true. Difficult to deal with, which you've noted from a permitting, from a regulatory basis. We can be tough to deal with. I was at at a U.S. Chamber event in Austin, Texas, about 6 weeks ago, and the governor of Texas was there. And he talked about how Texas approaches the situation you're talking about. And what he said was their slogan is permits at the speed of business. And that's what they focus on, and that's why Texas has grown.
And
Doesn't
that's
mean
a
they're
great
operating.
term. That's
it's
a
great term.
That's
and
tremendous.
it doesn't mean they're operating unsafely. It doesn't mean they're operating in an environmentally unresponsible manner. It means that they've acknowledged that this is going to be critical. And when you talk about, is it the legislators, and I hate to say it this way, but it's almost like establish what you need and get out of the way.
Right.
And let business work appropriately, check to make sure they're doing it right. But it seems like in Pennsylvania, it's, well, here's part 1, section 2, fill this out, come back, and in 2 months we'll talk to you again. People get tired because time is money.
Time is money.
And you're putting up those barriers to investment. And here in PA, to go back to the natural gas industry briefly, it is more difficult even from a geological basis to drill in Pennsylvania, because if you're down in Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and you're on land, I mean, it's pretty flat. Here, it's much more difficult.
It's difficult.
And so that compounds the problem of longer permit times, of a tougher tax environment. So we've got to make the changes that are critical, but also change that perception. And sometimes that perception is more difficult. The perception we're old, Rust Belt, et cetera. That's got to change. And it changes when you send a signal that you want that investment. And when you send out the positive messages that say, invest in Pennsylvania because of the assets that we have.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think business can and should lead the way. I mean, business is the future, right? If we don't do business well, okay, the rest of the world is starting to. They may have even passed us up when it comes to leadership in the business community.
Yes, it's unfortunate, and we hear a lot about. And look, I don't disagree. Most jobs are, and most people are employed at small businesses.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right. And people say, well, small business, I support small business. Well, I support all businesses, because what you find is, and again, to go back to Shell as an example, small businesses in many cases are created when someone makes a major investment. When a Shell puts a big investment, $5, $6, $7 billion in the ground, what happens around that? Small businesses grow up to provide products and services to that major investment.
Absolutely.
And so without that big tranche of money that comes in that says we're investing out in Western Pennsylvania, absent that, you'll have other businesses start up. But that is what really supercharges the economic growth when someone comes in and says, here's what we're doing. It would have been great to get Amazon.
Absolutely.
We made a pitch.
Absolutely.
Pittsburgh made a pitch. Philadelphia made a pitch. Wasn't successful. Some of it was workforce. There were some. I suspect the tax was another part of it.
It had to play in it. Had to.
Yeah. So you have to think about that. So we are unfortunately falling, as you note, falling behind, and a lot of it is we're not getting those major investments that we need that will drive this economy forward.
No, you're exactly right. And you mentioned workforce, and that's a critical issue, because there was a time last 30 years where, we sat here and we said, we've got this available workforce. We've got a trained workforce, right? From coal, from steel, these people understand manufacturing. Well, guess what? That workforce isn't there anymore. They got old.
Correct.
They got old waiting for that investment to come.
Right.
So right now, workforce, which was a strategic advantage 20 years ago, is a disadvantage now.
Yes. We have had no bigger issue than workforce here. Yes, we're working taxes, et cetera. But every state has a workforce issue. You've got birth rates that are declining.
Right.
We have not been able to figure out our immigration issues. We have not been able to straighten that out to get in the kind of people that we need to move this economy forward. The state that gets workforce right will have a competitive advantage. And I talk to my colleagues all the time, and all of them are facing the same frustrations. And the governor, to his credit, a couple of years ago announced a major workforce initiative, the Keystone Workforce Command Center. He asked me to co-chair along with the head of the AFL-CIO and some of his cabinet secretaries. And we made some progress until this thing called COVID hit. We were meeting about a year and COVID comes in. And we identified a number of things we have to do better. We have to reduce barriers to employment. So criminal justice is, people who would love to be there but are denied because of a criminal record. And we were talking earlier about this other gentleman. Making sure that after a certain period of time and people have shown that they're responsible, bring them back in. Child care issues have to be addressed.
Exactly.
Transportation issues have to be addressed. And as I said, a big piece of this, some people don't want to talk about, is immigration. And unfortunately, both sides have used that as a weapon. My eyes were opened on immigration probably 4 or 5 years ago. I was up in Canada. I was up in Montreal. I was asked to go up by the Canadian Consul General to talk about how we can pass that newest, the successor to NAFTA,
Sure.
and now called USMCA. And we're at a startup company, tremendously attractive tech startup company in Montreal. And we're have an address from the CEO, and she was talking about all the things that they're doing on artificial intelligence. And I asked her a question. I said, look, how do you guys handle the situation of workforce? In the States, we have a tremendous problem getting people who are in the STEM, science,
Right.
technology, engineering, and math. She goes, not really a problem for us. We just go down and we find the best students graduating from some of your best universities, the CMUs, the Drexels, the Penns, the Penn States,
Right.
the MITs,
Yep.
who can't get an H-1B visa, and we bring them up here. That was incredibly eye-opening in
Yeah.
seeing the work that we have to do.
That's
we
amazing.
are educating the best, smartest people in the world, and they're going elsewhere.
Yep. And there's no better example of that than my industry in engineering.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly
I mean,
right.
it's like, we have some of the best engineering schools on earth
Yes.
in Pennsylvania. You named a few.
Absolutely.
Right? Just in Pittsburgh, with Pitt, CMU, WVU, and then throw in Penn State. But just in that little part of southwestern Pennsylvania, that's powerful. But we can't find people.
Correct.
We can't find people for jobs that are starting at $60,000, $70,000, $75,000
I
a
know.
year
That's exactly
with benefits,
right.
right? And that's very telling. That is very telling. And you mentioned COVID. What do you see the difference in business now post-COVID?
Well, as I said to someone not long ago, we've seen about 20 years of change in the workplace and the workforce in roughly 2 with COVID, because we have seen an increase in an understanding of how people value their labor. People have made value decisions about, do we need 2 incomes? About, do I want to continue to work? Maybe I retire early. A lot of things have been brought home to people.
Right.
Now, we are, not only do we work on public policy issues across the street, we're also an employer. We have about 50 employees in this organization. So we had to think about that too. Yeah. And so what we've had to become much more flexible and recognize the challenges that working parents, and let's be honest, in most cases, falls on women.
Sure.
And we've had far too many women who have either reduced their expectations and their career goals and ideals, or gotten out of the workplace entirely because of childcare challenges. And
Sure.
so we've got to figure out how to do that. We've tried to be as flexible as possible. If you might be in the office 2 or 3 days, if we can create that to where you and your partner can figure out how to handle those challenges, we're willing to do that. And when we interview people now, it used to be the obvious. What's the job like? What's the
Sure.
salary, et cetera. Now it's like, how much flexibility can I have? It's right up top.
Just went through. I had a conversation yesterday with
Right
a
up
young
top.
man, and we're very technology is a wonderful thing, right? So we're blessed by technology that we can have key staff working remotely, and that's great. So we're from our GPI, we're pretty flexible when it comes to accommodating our team
Right.
and our staff,
Right.
right? But it's a highly technical job. Right,
Yes.
so there are
Correct.
times where you just have to be in the office. You can't.
Absolutely.
There's no way you can do it.
That's right. And there's times when you want to be in the office, times
Sure.
when you want to bounce ideas off people. But,
Right.
I think back to March of 2020, and all of a sudden we figured out how to do it. I mean, it was,
Yeah.
okay, you're shutting down. I remember scrambling, how many laptops can we get? I didn't even have one back in March of 2020. So we had to go get me a laptop so I could
There
work,
you go.
because the governor shut everything down.
Right.
And so, we had to go figure all of that out relatively quickly, and we did. But also think about, in another way, how it's perhaps, I hope, as we move forward, had a positive impact on our workforce, which is folks who might have, say, a physical challenge that makes it difficult for them to leave their home. Well, now they don't have to.
Right.
They can, if we
Right.
can provide them the technology, if we can get to them,
And there's some
they can work
there's some
from their
talent
home.
there that was
There's-
missed for a
Absolutely.
long time.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely right. And I think that it also taught us how to do business together, right? Not so much as, as client facing, but the internal facing relationships
That's exactly right.
within your organization, right? That changed for the better, I think, because we had to talk more, we had to communicate more because we were separate.
That's right.
Right. So
That's right.
even though, and I noticed in our firm, a lot of the Zoom, kind of interactions
Yes.
have carried over into the workplace in a positive way. Right.
Yeah.
So that part of it, I think it bodes well for, how we move forward from here.
Well, and it creates some interesting discussion. I mean, we all talk about leadership, et cetera, and I'm doing some work now for the Gettysburg Foundation on that. And how do you address the challenges of leading when most or all of your workforce is remote?
Right.
How do you address that? How do you lead
Right.
forward? How do you create the vision? How do you create the buy-in? And there are some things that you continue to do the same. There's some things that you've got to do differently to make sure that your organization continues to move forward.
I agree, because I think, and this as a leader, when you're talking, whether you're trying to mentor someone or just collaborating with a colleague, body language is critical, right? You and I are having this conversation, okay? Just hand gestures, just body language. That if I was in Pittsburgh and you were here and we were on computer screens, this would be a different conversation. It would have a different feel.
Exactly right.
And I think that's a critical component of it, because we learned again how to read that.
Yeah.
From a distance, when you're not right here, you can't touch the person.
And look, we've all been on Zoom calls where all of a sudden you look up and there's 12 people on, and 8 of them have a blank screen because they've turned their camera off. How do you read that? Other than maybe I'm really totally disinterested. So
Absolutely.
It makes it even more challenging.
Absolutely. My biggest challenge was my dog. I have a dog, and he's just, he's a barker, and
Yeah.
he just but people got used to him.
Yeah.
I said, this is Walter. He's going to bark. Sooner or later, within the next 30 minutes to 60 minutes, he's going to bark. I'm going to let you know now, so nobody's shocked when he does. And, But yeah, I'm very encouraged by even the real estate market, right? The real estate market was gloom and doom,
right.
During COVID. But I think it's come back stronger and faster than what anybody, even in that industry, had.
Well, it has. I think it will be interesting to see how, for example, our cities shake out. As you have a lot of businesses that still haven't come back. The state, for example,
Sure.
we're here in Harrisburg, state still hasn't fully come back. Sure. How do they come back? When do they come back? At what level do they come back? Do people continue to stay? How does the rent situation work? And just as, or maybe more importantly, what does that do for the small businesses that are here, the restaurants in cities, whether it's Philly or Harrisburg or Pittsburgh or wherever you are? Do they come back? During the day might be tough. And as we've seen, just getting the workforce for those places has been very tough. But
it's very
the restaurants, the gift shops, the other places that thrive when cities thrive. If cities are at reduced levels of activity, what will that do for our small businesses? And I think we're all still trying to do that assessment.
Sure, and even in our smaller communities where your downtowns have been decimated for one reason or another, in a lot of our small urban boroughs, right? Not the rural township, but in our boroughs, restaurants are the best businesses. They're the thriving businesses. They're the hub of a lot of downtowns.
That nightlife. It creates that activity.
Yeah, it's a gathering place. It's someplace to go. Right. And when they're struggling, that makes an already struggling community. It makes it that much more difficult.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
no question.
How do you in this? I was thinking about this all the way out here. How do you see the role of a chamber of commerce, any chamber of commerce, regardless of size, in the life of the small business owner, right? Because a lot of small business owners will not join a chamber because they don't think they can afford it, number one, first and foremost, right? Because they're not looking at the value add and all of that. So from your position, you're basically the top guy in chambers of commerce in Pennsylvania, right? You're the leader of our Chamber of Commerce in the Commonwealth. So I'm very curious as to how you see that role with our small mom and pop businesses of a chamber.
Well, first, I really do think of myself with the local chambers as a colleague to local chambers. They're a critical piece of the fabric of this Commonwealth and of all the states across.
And as a leader of a small chamber, you come across that way.
I really do feel that. I mean,
yeah, you've done that.
Those are colleagues, and we've, one of the things that we did at the outset was back in April 2020, we brought together our local chamber partners. We called it Bringing PA Back, and we wanted to see who's doing well, who's not doing well, where the big. It was almost like a triage.
Right.
And so we worked to push out information to them. We told them how to get PPPs if they're eligible. We had webinars where we had 2,500 people on the webinars. We made a conscious decision to let everyone on, whether they were a member or not. Okay. And then obviously we went back later and talked to them about what service we provide, or
Yeah.
But those, and people always ask me, they'll say things like, "Well, should I join the U.S. chamber, the state chamber, or the local chamber?" And my answer is yes, because each of us do something that's a little different and a little complementary to each other. Local chambers, and I had this conversation, I spoke last week to a local Rotary, the Harrisburg Rotary, and we're talking about the lack of civility that we see. And I said that I feel optimistic about it because I look out and I see a Rotary and the people meeting from all backgrounds coming together and having that sense of community. I see chambers the same way. Chambers provide that sense of community, a place where people who may not philosophically and politically agree on everything, but come in for the good of the community. That's why I feel optimistic. But chambers are absolutely critical, not just providing those networking opportunities, the opportunities for information, but for providing a voice to the business person that can't be in the county seat, that can't be in Harrisburg, that can't be in Washington. Right. So that you and your business knows, hey, I can't make it to Harrisburg. Years ago, I was standing in the Capitol. It was a huge rally for some group was happening, and one of the State House staffers said, "Hey, how come you can't get business out here like this?" I said, "Because business isn't waiting for the next rally; they're back home waiting for the next customer." And
that's amazing, right there.
And so
hit the nail on the head.
Need someone to represent them.
Right.
That's what chambers provide. And when they say they can't afford it, I would argue you can't afford not to have your local chamber, because it's that sense of community. It helps to create those thriving businesses to which you referred, that are the heartbeat of the local community. And I always say, when I talk to local chamber people who've retired, I say, "Are you staying there?" And they say, "Yeah, I am." I said, "You know what? I'm so glad to hear that, because I like people seeing the fruits of the work that they've done in that community. So to hear that they're staying there always creates a positive feeling for me."
Well, I agree, and I really have to agree with everything you said, because we are blessed in the Southwest that not only our county commissioners are very supportive and active in not just the county chambers, but even drilling down into the local chambers, but also our legislators. Our Senator Ward and Senator Bartolotta are very active, even in the local chambers.
Correct.
Right.
Absolutely.
So because they get it, right? They both have business backgrounds. They get it, and so I think it's critical for that mom and pop to have that advocate, right?
Absolutely.
And I think the hurdle of cost, a lot of the smaller chambers are overcoming, but it's a message I think we have to do a little bit better getting out to that market, right?
Yes.
To that audience. So
absolutely. They have to have that value proposition, as we call it, to say, here's why. And in all honesty, the reasons that people are joining chambers have changed. Mm-hmm. It used to be, it was the civic thing to do. I need to be part of that. Now people say, all right, if I send my hard-earned money to you, what are you going to do with it? And I think, again, it's the networking, it's the information, but critically, it's that voice that they can provide, to the coordinated voice to the local official. And for us, it's critical for us to interact with chambers like yours, because we need to make sure that what those members of the House and Senate hear in Harrisburg is the same thing they hear back in Charleroi.
You're exactly
right. It needs to be the same message, because otherwise it's like, well, geez, they're not on the same page with the state chamber. What's going on with that?
That's exactly right. And when you think about the voice, right? So, and I've always been one that there's strength in numbers, right? So your voice here across the street from these guys, right, magnifies ours tenfold.
And vice versa.
Right? Mm-hmm. So if our friend Jeff Cotulla in Washington County, in Westmoreland County, in the Fayette County chambers, right, in all of their small chambers come here with you and march across that street.
Which we do from time to time.
They're going to listen to us.
That's exactly
They're
right.
going to listen to us. But, the Mon Valley Regional Chamber can shout as loud as they want, but they're basically just swimming upstream in the Monongahela River because it's not always going to be heard. If it's rarely going to be heard, right? So I think that collaborative piece, because think about it, Jane. Most people, the average person, can't put a dollar amount on networking.
That's right.
Because they don't do it, right? So you and I know, I do it for a living. Okay, so if I didn't know how to network, if I didn't understand the value of meeting people, I wouldn't have a job. I wouldn't be where I'm at. But the average person walking down on the sidewalk down there doesn't understand how to put that value to that piece. And I think that's something that, we as advocates, for small business need to get that education piece out there.
Yeah, and we've had people who've come to our events, and we do a big event every year at the governor's residence, and we had somebody come in for the first time and say, "This was a tremendous event. There were 4 businesses here that I've been trying to get in front of for 2 years, and I found all 4 of them here.
That's awesome.
And I got in front of them and talked about my product or service, whatever it happened to be. Right. So that's what we all provide. We provide that opportunity, but at heart, we are an advocacy organization. As we say, we wear the target.
Sure.
Because I don't want a small business being out way out front, because they become too easy of a target. We'll wear the target. We'll go over and advocate for everybody. As I said, we know they don't have the time to be here. Many cases don't have the inclination. They don't have time to dig into the issue and find out. But we love to hear the stories about what this particular issue means to a small business. We need those. We need those. I hate to say it, anecdotes. And as unfortunate as it is, a lot of times, a lot of legislation is what I call legislation by anecdote,
Sure.
as opposed
to
comprehensive research on the issue.
Right. I agree. I work a lot in other states, other cities, and when I go into a new city looking at a project, and from an engineering perspective, right, and I'll go in and just say their public utility, their water utility has a potential project, and I always go to their Chamber of Commerce.
Sure.
And I go and I sit down and talk with them. You wouldn't believe the intelligence that I get out of that.
Where it all flows through.
Absolutely,
it flows in
absolutely.
And out of that office.
And they know what's going on. They tell you what's going on, feet on the ground. And I've actually, I will tell you, I believe that I've won projects in other cities because of developing a relationship with their local Chamber of Commerce.
I don't think there's any question about that.
Oftentimes
they
know
do
things.
It. I mean, if there's, for example, a political race, a lot of times, hey, why is so-and-so, why did I hear this from so-and-so? And is that true? And what's going on there? And what's causing this?
Right.
They're going to know it.
Absolutely.
They're going to know it.
I want to close out with the Civil War thing.
All
right,
sure.
because I'm fascinated by
you can see, I got a little bit of an interest in
yes, you do. And my father was a history teacher.
Oh,
and
you did say that. That's right.
He was a Civil War guy as well. So
okay.
But I'm curious about first of all being the chair of the museum is really cool. But what led you to this book? It's and I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to because it's the title itself is fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've been interested in the Civil War since I was 11 years old, quite literally. And so more than 20 years ago, a friend, a colleague I used to work for API, the American Petroleum Institute. I ran the Pennsylvania office. He called and said, "Hey, I inherited a bunch of stuff, and found it in a cabin he inherited, unheated cabin on a lake in Wisconsin, and I helped him sell some stuff, and then he goes, I think I got stuff, I think they're Civil War letters." And anyway, long story short, they were. Rather than sell them for him as he wanted, I wound up buying them because I didn't want to split the collection up. Turned out to be a series of wartime letters between an Irish immigrant captain and a woman he met in camp in Peoria. And this guy went through Shiloh, Vicksburg, Fort Donelson, the Meridian Campaign.
So it's a true story.
It's completely true. And so I put it in context of the time, like his experiences, how reflective were they of other people's experiences? Both of them talk about religion. How important was religion to both of these people? So I follow them and the other main characters through to the end of the book, the end of their lives, and it was published in 2016. So it was. If you want to know how to write a book, don't ask me because it took me 16 years because my day job kept interfering with it.
I'm in the same boat. I've been writing a book for about 8 years, but yeah. So, but that's amazing because I love that the fact that we were able to recreate the country basically from coming out of that conflict, right? Because things weren't going well from the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution when we became a country up to that point. It wasn't going that great.
Well, it was
right?
tough. Look, we had what someone else has said. It's a great summary, because we've always been cursed with what has been called slavery as a birth defect of the American Republic, and we've had to deal with that. And we didn't deal with it as well as we should have coming out of the Civil War, because we still wound up with Jim Crow laws. And I often think about the fact that John Wilkes Booth is an even bigger villain as you look back now, because you wonder, what if Lincoln had been able to fill out his second term? What if Lincoln, because keep in mind, they weren't limited to 2 at that point, because FDR had 4.
Right.
What if Lincoln had gotten a 3rd and a 4th term?
You're exactly right.
I think this country would be in a better shape because he was better prepared to do it.
Right.
He was a better politician and a better person than his successor, Andrew Johnson.
Sure.
And I think this country would be today in a better position.
I agree.
If Lincoln had lived
I agree.
past April of 1865.
Yeah, I agree. And I read I read a book about General Grant. And he said, and now this author from his research said that Grant carried the guilt of Lincoln's assassination with him to his grave.
He was supposed to be there.
Because he was supposed to be there. And he said that if he had been there, Booth never would have had access to him.
Yeah,
right?
Probably. Could well be true, or he could have been shot too. Who knows?
Who knows, right?
But no, and Grant had his own issues as a president. Some of it was because he was just too trusting of others.
Right. I
think that Lincoln had that appropriate, I'll call it cynicism. He had an incredible way of touching people. He was one of the most deft politicians that you'll ever see, and because people looked down on him as being a country bumpkin, and I think he quickly disavowed many people of that.
Right. Last question, purely speculative. Who was the best tactical general, Lee or Grant?
Oh.
In your opinion,
you're limiting me to those two?
No. Those are the two. Those are the marquee guys.
But I'm not sure Sherman wouldn't have been better.
Okay.
Think about what Sherman did on his march to the sea. He did a tremendous job and avoided a lot of pitched battles. All of them had their positives. All of them had their negatives.
Sure.
Sherman certainly had
like any great
too,
leaders,
like any great leaders do. Lee had his downside exposed at Gettysburg, and so I don't know. I may kind of want to go over to Uncle Billy Sherman.
That's interesting. Interesting. I love it. Well, listen. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
For
we
coming
appreciate
out.
it. It's been great, and wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
Thank
and
you.
You're going to be around PA. You're going to hang around
here for a little while.
Okay.
I'll be around for a while.
Very good. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.
We appreciate it.
Absolutely.